Imagine this, a beloved pastor in the heart of Texas, preaching love and redemption every Sunday, harbors a deadly secret. One fateful night, he picks up a hammer and bludgeons his closest church ally to death, all to bury an affair that could shatter his world. This is the chilling story of Pastor Jonathan Hayes, who murdered Elder Michael Thompson to conceal his hidden romance with Congregant David Ramirez. Stick around, because the truth is darker than you think. As I dive into stories like this, I can't help but reflect on the fragility of human facades. In a place like Texas, where faith runs deep and traditions hold strong, the pressure to conform can turn ordinary people into monsters. Pastor Jonathan Hayes wasn't born a killer, he was molded by a society that demanded perfection from its spiritual leaders. His secret affair with David Ramirez wasn't just taboo, it was a ticking bomb in a conservative church community. And when Elder Michael Thompson stumbled upon it, the explosion was inevitable. This case reminds us that behind every sermon of grace, there might lurk a shadow of desperation. It's a stark narrative on hypocrisy, love, and the lengths we'll go to protect our secrets. But let's not judge too quickly. As we unpack this, ask yourself, what would you do if your entire life hung by a thread of deception? Before we jump into the details, if you're new here, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a deep dive into the world's most shocking crimes. Like this video if you're ready for a story that will keep you up at night, and drop a comment below with your thoughts as we go. Your support keeps these investigations coming. In the sprawling suburbs of Houston, Texas, Grace Community Church stood as a beacon of faith, its steeple a landmark for a growing evangelical congregation. At its helm was Pastor Jonathan Hayes, a man whose charisma and conviction made him a local legend. Born in a small town south of Dallas, Jonathan grew up steeped in Baptist values, raised by parents who saw Scripture as life's guide. Even as a boy, he had a gift for speaking, captivating churchgoers with his knack for weaving Scripture into stories that felt alive. By his early 20s, he'd graduated from a top seminary, married his high school sweetheart, Emily Hayes, and set his sights on a life of ministry. Jonathan and Emily moved to Houston, where he took a role as assistant pastor at Grace Community Church, a modest congregation of a few hundred. The church, founded decades earlier, was a tight-knit community known for its outreach, food drives, youth programs, and mission trips. Jonathan's energy was electric. His sermons blended humor, heart, and Scripture, drawing crowds that outgrew the sanctuary. When the founding pastor retired, Jonathan, still in his early 30s, was named lead pastor, a bold choice for someone so young. But he proved them right. Under his leadership, Grace Community swelled to over 1,500 members, becoming a megachurch with a modern edge. He introduced live-streamed services and a worship band led by Emily, whose voice lifted the congregation. They had 2 children, Caleb and Hannah, completing the image of a perfect evangelical family. To the flock, he was Pastor John, the approachable leader who'd linger after services to talk over coffee. He organized back-to-school drives, led mission trips to build homes in rural Mexico, and preached about forgiveness and family values. Congregants adored him, seeing a man destined to lead them closer to God. But behind the polished exterior, Jonathan carried a secret he'd buried since his teens, an attraction to men. In the conservative world of Texas evangelicalism, where such feelings were condemned, he suppressed them, throwing himself into his marriage and ministry. He believed prayer and discipline could erase his desires. Emily, his devoted wife, noticed his occasional distance, late nights at the church, moments of quiet unease, but attributed it to the demands of pastoring a megachurch. She had no idea the storm brewing inside him. Then came David Ramirez, a 28-year-old graphic designer who joined Grace Community after moving from San Antonio. David was single, charismatic, and brought a creative spark to the church's media team, designing flyers and managing the website. Jonathan, now in his late 30s, was drawn to David's confidence and easy smile. Their work together started innocently, late-night meetings to plan sermon graphics or holiday programs. But soon, glances lingered, and conversations turned personal. David, openly gay in his private life but discreet at church, sensed Jonathan's curiosity. One night, after a long session editing a video for a church event, David broke the tension. "John," he said softly, "you don't have to keep pretending." In that dimly lit office, a stolen kiss ignited a secret affair. The relationship was a high-wire act. Jonathan and David met in budget motels on Houston's outskirts, paying cash to avoid detection. They used burner phones, their texts coded to look like church business, David's number saved as media volunteer. For Jonathan, the affair was a lifeline, a release from years of repression. But it came with crushing guilt. He'd preach against sinful lifestyles on Sundays, then meet David in secret by Monday. David pushed for more openness, dreaming of a life where they could be themselves. Jonathan shut it down, his voice sharp with fear. "If this gets out, I lose everything," he'd say. "My family, my church, my life." The stakes were sky-high in a community where reputation was everything. The affair might have stayed buried, but for Elder Michael Thompson. At 62, Michael was a rock of Grace Community Church. A retired accountant, he'd been an elder since the church's founding, handling finances and guiding its moral compass. Married to his wife, Linda, with 3 grown children, Michael was a straight talker who valued integrity above all. He'd mentored Jonathan, seeing him as a son, and defended him when congregants grumbled about his ambitious changes. But lately, Michael noticed Jonathan slipping, sermons lacked their usual fire, and he'd miss elder meetings with flimsy excuses. One evening, while sorting through church records, Michael stumbled on something damning, a hotel receipt in Jonathan's desk, for a room booked far from any church event. Digging deeper, he found a church-issued phone Jonathan had left behind. The screen lit up with texts from David Ramirez. Intimate, unmistakable messages like, "Can't wait for tonight, love." Michael's heart sank. He believed in the church's teachings on marriage and saw Jonathan's double life as a betrayal of trust, not just to his family, but to the congregation. In a private meeting at the church, Michael confronted Jonathan. The office felt suffocating as they faced off. "Pastor," Michael said, his voice steady but heavy, "this affair has to stop. You're leading a double life, and it's wrong. Confess to the elders and get help, or I'll have to tell them myself. This church deserves better." Jonathan's face drained of color. He pleaded for time, promising to end things with David and seek counseling. Michael gave him a short leash, 1 week to come clean, or he'd call a meeting with the elder board and lay it all bare. As Michael walked out, Jonathan sat alone, staring at the cross on his desk, his world teetering on the edge. The man who'd built an empire of faith was now one misstep from losing it all. In the heart of Houston's suburbs, Grace Community Church stood as a pillar of faith, its sanctuary a haven for over 1,000 worshippers. Pastor Jonathan Hayes, the charismatic leader who transformed it into a megachurch, was a man on the edge. His secret affair with David Ramirez, a young graphic designer on the church's media team, had been exposed by Elder Michael Thompson, a trusted confidant who demanded Jonathan confess or face ruin. Michael, a 62-year-old retired accountant and church founder, had given Jonathan 1 week to end the affair and come clean to the elder board. But as the deadline loomed, Jonathan's fear turned to desperation. He wasn't ready to lose his wife, Emily, his 2 children, Caleb and Hannah, or the empire of faith he'd built. What unfolded next would shatter the church and shock the city. It was a humid evening, the kind where Houston's air clings like a second skin. The church was nearly empty, its halls quiet except for the hum of air conditioning. Jonathan had invited Michael to the pastor's office for a private talk to resolve their conflict. Michael, ever trusting, arrived with a folder tucked under his arm, evidence of Jonathan's affair, a hotel receipt, printed text messages from David, and notes on Jonathan's suspicious absences. The office, lit by a single desk lamp, felt like a pressure cooker. Jonathan poured coffee for them both, his hands trembling as he set the mugs down. "Michael, please," he began, his voice low, "I'm ending it with David. I'll get help. Just give me time. Michael's face was stern, his eyes unwavering. Jonathan, you're not just a man, you're a pastor. You've betrayed your family, your church, and God. I can't let this slide. The elders need to know. The words hit like a sledgehammer. Jonathan's mind raced, images of Emily's heartbreak, his children's confusion, the congregation's outrage. Years of suppressing his true self, of preaching against the very desires he harbored, had built a pressure that now erupted. On his desk sat a claw hammer, left from recent repairs to the church's leaky roof. Without a plan, only panic, Jonathan grabbed it. Michael, you don't understand what this'll do to me, he pleaded one last time. Michael stood, shaking his head. I'm sorry, John. It's over. In that moment, something snapped. Jonathan swung the hammer, striking Michael on the side of the head. The elder staggered, blood trickling from his temple, his eyes wide with shock. He collapsed to the carpet, groaning, still alive. Driven by fear, Jonathan swung again, 3 more times, each blow harder than the last. The autopsy would later confirm 5 strikes, crushing Michael's skull and causing fatal brain trauma. The office fell silent, save for Jonathan's ragged breathing. He stood frozen, the bloody hammer in his hand, staring at Michael's lifeless body. The pastor who'd preached love and redemption had just committed murder. But Jonathan wasn't a seasoned criminal, he was a man in freefall. His mind churned with one thought: cover it up. The church basement, a cluttered storage area filled with old hymnals and Christmas decorations, became his solution. Dragging Michael's body down the stairs, Jonathan left a faint smear of blood on the handrail, evidence that would later haunt him. He stashed the body behind a stack of boxes, hoping it wouldn't be found for days. Back in the office, Jonathan worked frantically to erase the crime. He scrubbed the carpet with bleach from the janitor's closet, though faint traces of blood would linger under forensic blacklights. The hammer, hastily wiped down, went back into the toolbox. To create an alibi, he grabbed Michael's phone and texted Michael's wife, Linda, working late on church inventory. Home soon. It was a clumsy move, but Jonathan was improvising. He then drove Michael's car to an abandoned lot in Houston's industrial district, a rough area known for petty crime. There, he staged a robbery, smashing the windows, scattering papers from the glove box, and leaving Michael's body in the trunk, hoping animals or decay would obscure the evidence. He burned his bloody clothes in the church's outdoor incinerator, used for yard waste, and showered in the pastor's quarters to wash away any traces of the crime. By midnight, Jonathan was back home with Emily, slipping into bed as if nothing had happened. Long day at church, he muttered when she stirred. Emily, unaware of the horror, nodded and went back to sleep. The next morning, Linda grew worried when Michael didn't return. She called the church, then the police, reporting him missing. Jonathan played the part of the grieving pastor, organizing a prayer vigil for Michael's safe return. He even preached a sermon that Sunday, his voice steady as he spoke of trusting God in dark times. The congregation, oblivious, wept and prayed for their missing elder. David Ramirez, Jonathan's lover, sensed something was wrong. Jonathan had been distant, texting him to stay away for now. David, unaware of the murder, assumed it was just another of Jonathan's bouts of guilt over their affair. Meanwhile, the police began their search for Michael. The abandoned lot where his car was parked was a known trouble spot, leading detectives to initially suspect a random robbery gone wrong. But the discovery of Michael's body, just days later, changed everything. A jogger spotted the smashed car, and police found Michael in the trunk, his skull shattered by blunt force trauma. The autopsy pointed to a hammer as the murder weapon, and the lack of stolen items. Michael's wallet was still in his pocket, ruled out robbery as a motive. Detectives began piecing together Michael's last movements. Linda mentioned his recent concerns about church matters, but didn't know details. Elders recalled Michael's plan to call a special board meeting, now cancelled due to his death. Forensic teams scoured the car, finding church carpet fibers on Michael's shoes and a single hair that didn't belong to him, later matched to Jonathan. The investigation was closing in, and Jonathan's carefully crafted facade was starting to crack. The man who'd killed to protect his secret was about to face the consequences of a crime he never planned, but couldn't escape. Grace Community Church was reeling. Elder Michael Thompson, a 62-year-old pillar of the congregation, had been found dead in the trunk of his car, his skull shattered by hammer blows. The police initially suspected a robbery gone wrong, given the smashed windows and the rough industrial lot where the car was abandoned. But the untouched wallet in Michael's pocket and the absence of fingerprints pointed to something more personal. Pastor Jonathan Hayes, the charismatic leader who turned the church into a megachurch, led prayer vigils for Michael, his face a mask of grief. Behind it, he was a man unraveling, knowing he'd killed to protect his secret affair with David Ramirez, a young graphic designer in the church's media team. The investigation, led by a sharp-eyed detective, was about to blow his world apart. Detective Sarah Klein, a 15-year veteran of the Houston Police Department, took charge of the case. Known for her relentless pursuit of truth, Sarah sensed the robbery angle didn't add up. Why leave the wallet? Why stage the car so far from the church, she questioned during a briefing. The autopsy confirmed Michael died from blunt force trauma, 5 blows from a heavy object, likely a hammer. The precision of the attack suggested rage, not randomness. Sarah's team began retracing Michael's final hours, starting with his last known location, Grace Community Church. Linda Thompson, Michael's wife of 40 years, was devastated but resolute. When Sarah interviewed her at their modest home, Linda shared a crucial detail. Michael was troubled, she said, her voice trembling. He mentioned issues at church he needed to address with the elders. He was planning a meeting but wouldn't tell me more. This piqued Sarah's interest. The elder board, a group of senior church leaders, confirmed Michael had scheduled a meeting but cancelled it due to his disappearance. One elder, hesitant, recalled Michael's frustration with Pastor John's behavior, but offered no specifics. Sarah's team turned their attention to the church. Grace Community was a bustling hub, its 1,500 members drawn by Jonathan's fiery sermons and outreach programs. But beneath the surface, whispers of tension emerged. A church secretary, nervous but cooperative, provided the first break. She'd overheard Michael arguing with Jonathan in the church office, catching phrases like, living a lie, and, this can't go on. When pressed, she admitted to an anonymous tip she'd sent to the police, hinting at a personal matter involving Jonathan and David Ramirez, the media team volunteer. Sarah's instincts flared, this was no random crime. Subpoenas for phone records revealed a bombshell. Texts between Jonathan and David, stored on a church-issued phone, were intimate and coded but unmistakable. One message from Jonathan, sent days before the murder, read, "He knows. I can't let this ruin me." David's replies were affectionate, urging Jonathan to, be honest with yourself. Sarah brought David in for questioning. The 28-year-old was visibly shaken, his eyes red from sleepless nights. He confessed to the affair immediately. "Jonathan and I were in love," he said, his voice breaking. But he was terrified of anyone finding out. Michael confronted him, said he'd tell the elders. "I begged John to come clean, but he wouldn't listen." David swore he had no knowledge of the murder, claiming Jonathan had told him to lay low after Michael's disappearance. The evidence was mounting, but Sarah needed more to tie Jonathan to the crime. A search warrant for the church turned up critical clues. In the pastor's office, forensic teams used blacklights and found faint blood traces on the carpet, missed during Jonathan's frantic cleanup. The blood matched Michael's DNA. In a toolbox under the desk, they found a claw hammer with microscopic blood spatter, also matching Michael. The basement, where Jonathan had hidden the body, revealed a smear of blood on the stair railing, a careless mistake. Fibers from the church carpet were found on Michael's shoes in the car, and a single hair in the trunk, later DNA matched to Jonathan, sealed the connection. Sarah interviewed Jonathan at the church, keeping her questions vague to gauge his reactions. He was polished, almost too perfect, expressing sorrow for Michael's death. "He was like a father to me," Jonathan said, his voice steady. "Who could do such a thing?" But his composure faltered when Sarah mentioned the hotel receipts Michael had found. "Just business trips," he stammered, avoiding her gaze. Sarah didn't push, she had enough for an arrest but wanted to build an airtight case. The net tightened as the community began to fracture. Rumors of Jonathan's affair spread, fueled by David's cooperation with police. Congregants were divided, some refused to believe their pastor could be involved, while others whispered about his late-night meetings with David. Emily, Jonathan's wife, sensed the shift. She confronted him at home, asking why the police were asking about Michael's last days. Jonathan brushed it off, claiming it was routine, but Emily's trust was eroding. Their children, Caleb and Hannah, young teens, overheard the tension, confused by their father's secrecy. Sarah's team cross-referenced the text from Michael's phone, working late on church inventory, sent to Linda the night he died. The timestamp matched a period when Jonathan was alone at the church, and cell tower data placed his phone at the industrial lot where Michael's car was found. It was enough. On a quiet morning, police arrived at the Hayes home. Jonathan was in the kitchen, sipping coffee, when officers knocked. Emily opened the door, her face paling as they read Jonathan his rights. Handcuffed in front of his family, Jonathan said nothing, his eyes fixed on the floor. Caleb and Hannah watched in stunned silence as their father was led away. The congregation was in chaos, with some members defending Jonathan, calling it a witch hunt, while others felt betrayed. Linda Thompson, grieving her husband, said, "Michael only wanted the truth. He died for it." David Ramirez, racked with guilt, left the church, unable to face the community he'd once served. Emily, blindsided by the affair and the murder charge, packed a bag and took the children to her parents' home, distancing herself from the man she thought she knew. Jonathan sat in a holding cell, his carefully constructed life in ruins. The evidence, blood, texts, DNA, and David's testimony, was overwhelming. Sarah Klein, reviewing the case file, felt no triumph. "This wasn't just a murder," she later said. "It was a man destroyed by his own secrets." The investigation had peeled back the layers of Jonathan's facade, exposing a truth that would change Grace Community Church forever. The courtroom in Houston was a pressure cooker, filled with congregants, and a community torn apart. Pastor Jonathan Hayes, once the shining star of Grace Community Church, sat at the defense table, his face gaunt, eyes fixed on the floor. He was charged with the first-degree murder of Elder Michael Thompson, a 62-year-old church founder bludgeoned to death with a hammer to keep Jonathan's affair with David Ramirez a secret. The prosecution, led by Mark Reynolds, aimed to paint Jonathan as a calculating hypocrite. The defense, headed by Lisa Vargas, argued he was a man broken by fear. As the trial unfolded, revelations would shake the foundations of faith and trust in Houston. The prosecution opened with a damning case. Mark Reynolds, a seasoned prosecutor with a commanding presence, laid out the timeline. Jonathan Hayes preached love on Sundays and dealt death by Monday, he told the jury. He killed Michael Thompson, a man who trusted him, to hide an affair that betrayed his wife, his church, and his God. Evidence was overwhelming. Blood traces in the church office matched Michael's DNA, found under blacklights despite Jonathan's cleanup. A claw hammer in the office toolbox bore microscopic blood spatter, also Michael's. A smear of blood on the basement stair railing, where Jonathan hid the body, and church carpet fibers on Michael's shoes tied the crime to Grace Community Church. A single hair in the car trunk, where Michael's body was dumped, matched Jonathan's DNA. Phone records sealed the case, texts between Jonathan and David, including one saying, "He knows. I can't let this ruin me," sent days before the murder. David Ramirez, now 28, was the prosecution's star witness. Taking the stand, his voice trembled as he described the affair. "Jonathan and I were in love," he said, glancing at the packed gallery. But he was terrified of anyone finding out. Michael confronted him, said he'd tell the elders. I begged John to be honest, but he was paralyzed. David's testimony, given under immunity, was devastating. He confirmed Jonathan's panic after Michael's threat, though he insisted he knew nothing of the murder until police questioned him. The jury watched, some visibly uncomfortable, as David described stolen motel meetings and coded texts, exposing the pastor's double life in a conservative Texas church. Linda Thompson, Michael's widow, took the stand next, her grief palpable. Michael believed in truth, she said, clutching a tissue. He saw Jonathan as a son, but he couldn't let the affair slide. He died trying to protect our church. Her words hit hard, especially among congregants in the courtroom, many of whom still struggled to reconcile their beloved pastor with the killer in the dock. Linda's testimony painted Michael as a man of integrity, amplifying the tragedy of his loss. Emily Hayes, Jonathan's wife, was a reluctant witness. Her marriage had unraveled since the arrest, and she'd moved with their children, Caleb and Hannah, to her parents' home. On the stand, Emily's voice was soft but steady. I trusted John completely, she said. I thought his late nights were for sermons. I never knew about David until the police told me. Her heartbreak drew murmurs from the gallery. When asked about Jonathan's behavior before the murder, she recalled his growing anxiety, his insistence that everything was fine. The jury saw a woman betrayed not just by infidelity but by a crime she couldn't fathom. The defense fought back. Lisa Vargas, a skilled attorney known for taking tough cases, argued Jonathan acted in a moment of panic, not premeditation. He was a man trapped by his own secrets, she told the jury. The pressure of his role, his faith, and a society that condemned his truth drove him to a breaking point. A forensic psychologist, Dr. Elena Vasquez, testified about Jonathan's internalized homophobia, rooted in his strict Baptist upbringing. He lived in constant conflict, she explained. Michael's threat to expose him triggered a fight-or-flight response. Vargas leaned on this, portraying Jonathan as a victim of circumstance, not a cold-blooded killer. The trial's climax came when Jonathan took the stand. In a gray suit, his once confident demeanor gone, he faced the jury. I never meant to hurt Michael, he said, tears streaming. He was going to tell everyone about David. I saw my life, my family, my church, collapsing. I grabbed the hammer in a moment of fear. I'm so sorry. His confession, raw and unfiltered, stunned the courtroom. Some jurors looked sympathetic, others, stone-faced. Reynolds pounced on cross-examination, pressing Jonathan on the 5 blows to Michael's head. One swing might be panic, Reynolds said sharply. 5 is intent. Jonathan had no answer, his head bowed. Church security footage, grainy but damning, showed Jonathan and Michael entering the office alone the night of the murder. Cell tower data placed Jonathan's phone at the industrial lot where Michael's body was dumped. The text to Linda from Michael's phone, working late on church inventory, was traced to Jonathan's presence at the church. The defense tried to poke holes, suggesting the evidence was circumstantial or that someone else could have used the hammer, but the jury wasn't swayed. After 3 weeks of testimony, the jury deliberated for 2 days. The verdict came swiftly, guilty of first-degree murder. Jonathan showed no emotion as the foreman read the decision, but Emily, in the gallery, stifled a sob. The judge sentenced Jonathan to life without parole, calling the crime a betrayal of trust at every level. As he was led away, congregants outside the courthouse chanted prayers, some for justice, others for mercy. The trial's fallout was immediate. Grace Community Church lost hundreds of members, unable to recover from the scandal. Emily filed for divorce, seeking to protect Caleb and Hannah from the public scrutiny. David Ramirez left Houston, haunted by his role in the tragedy. The revelations forced the church to confront its own values, sparking debates among members about forgiveness and judgment. Jonathan, now in a Texas prison, wrote a letter to the congregation, read by his attorney, my sin wasn't loving David. It was hiding it and letting fear drive me to murder. I failed you all. For many, it was too little, too late. The trial hadn't just convicted a man, it had exposed the cost of living a lie in a world that demanded perfection. The story of Pastor Jonathan Hayes is a tragedy woven from secrets, fear, and a desperate act that shattered lives. In Houston, Texas, Grace Community Church once stood as a beacon of faith, its pews filled with over 1,500 worshipers drawn by Jonathan's charisma and sermons of redemption. But beneath his polished exterior, Jonathan hid a truth he believed could destroy him: his love for David Ramirez, a young graphic designer in the church's media team. When Elder Michael Thompson, a 62-year-old pillar of the congregation, discovered their affair and threatened to expose it, Jonathan's fear of losing his wife, Emily Hayes, his children, Caleb and Hannah, and his revered position drove him to a horrific act, bludgeoning Michael to death with a hammer. The trial laid bare his double life, convicting him of first-degree murder and sentencing him to life without parole. But the story doesn't end in the courtroom, its ripples continue to echo through the lives it touched and the lessons it left behind. Jonathan's fall was more than a personal tragedy, it was a mirror held up to a community grappling with faith, truth, and judgment. Grace Community Church, once a thriving megachurch, lost nearly 70% of its members, unable to recover from the betrayal. Some congregants clung to their memories of Pastor John, the leader who'd guided them through hard times, while others felt deceived, their trust in spiritual leadership broken. The church faced lawsuits from Michael's family, led by his widow, Linda Thompson, who sought accountability for the negligence that allowed Jonathan's secrets to fester. A new pastor took over, implementing reforms to ensure transparency, but the scars remained. The congregation's fracture reflected a deeper wound, the tension between rigid doctrine and human complexity. Emily Hayes's life was upended. The revelation of Jonathan's affair with David, followed by his murder conviction, shattered her world. She divorced Jonathan, moving with Caleb and Hannah to her parents' home to shield them from public scrutiny. In her quiet moments, Emily wrestled with the man she thought she knew, a husband who preached love but hid his truth, leaving her to rebuild a life for herself and her children. Caleb and Hannah, young adults, distanced themselves from organized religion, their faith shaken by their father's hypocrisy. Emily later wrote a memoir, pouring her pain into words, seeking healing through honesty. David Ramirez, consumed by guilt over his role in the affair, left Houston for a fresh start. He became an advocate for LGBTQ+ rights in religious communities, channeling his regret into a mission to help others live authentically. His love for Jonathan, once a source of joy, became a weight he carried, knowing their secret indirectly led to Michael's death. Yet he refused to let shame define him, choosing instead to fight for acceptance in spaces where fear often rules. Linda Thompson, widowed by Jonathan's hand, found purpose in her grief. She volunteered at local shelters, honoring Michael's legacy of service. The Thompson family established a scholarship fund in his name, supporting low-income students, a testament to his generous spirit. Linda's strength in the face of loss inspired those around her, a reminder that even in tragedy, good can endure. The case sparked broader conversations in Texas evangelical circles. Some churches introduced anonymous counseling to support those struggling with identity, while others doubled down on traditional teachings, deepening divide. The story highlighted the toll of living inauthentically, with helplines reporting increased calls from religious individuals wrestling with their own secrets. Jonathan's life sentence in a Texas prison became a symbol of consequence, not just for murder, but for the internal war he waged against himself. From his cell, he wrote to his former congregation, admitting his true sin wasn't loving David but letting fear drive him to violence. His words, though sincere, offered little solace to those he'd betrayed. Now it's your turn to weigh in. Do you believe the pressure of conservative expectations pushed Jonathan Hayes to murder, or was his choice to kill Michael Thompson entirely his own? Could living openly have changed this story's ending, or was tragedy inevitable? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I want to hear your perspective on this complex case. Let's get the conversation going. If this story of faith, secrets, and murder gripped you, smash that like button and subscribe for more true crime deep dives that peel back the layers of human nature. Share this video with a friend who loves a good mystery. Your support keeps these stories alive, so let's keep digging into the truth together. I'll see you in the comments and in our next video. Stay curious and stay safe.